Sweet. Hey, Greg, thanks for coming on the 2022 and 2022 challenge. I really appreciate you taking time out of your week to have a chat with me around sort of your life journey and everything rugby. I think it's fair to say that sort of Fijian rugby is getting all the praise at the moment that it deserves for all the good that it's done around the world for not only a lot of different countries, but also for the game of rugby, because it's the guys and the girls are so talented. What do you see things going for Fiji at the moment, and where it's come, especially with your journey?
Oh, well, there's two parts of that question, isn't there? There's where it is right now and how it's got there. Look, at the moment, I think it's very exciting. Fiji for a long time has been around for its sevens, obviously. You know, it's the world knows about the Fijian sevens team for a long time. But the emergence of the 15s team over the last few years is very pleasing. It's I think the has an international team that's got stronger by having a lot of professionals based overseas. So, in France particularly, but there's also boys in Europe as well. There's a smattering of boys in Australia and New Zealand, but so that's made the national team strong. But the emergence of the Fijian Drua team into the Super Rugby competition in New Zealand I think, is significant, because it's for the next tier of boys who are equally talented but just haven't quite had the opportunity. So it's like a homegrown team competing against the best of New Zealand and Australia on a weekly basis, and I think they'll play a massive part in lifting the level of rugby in Fiji, and not only for the men but also for the women. The Fijiana Drua team won the Super Rugby competition in Australia, so now's off the back of limited preparation. There's just natural talent and a lot of new girls to the game. So both sides of the game, for men and women, I think it's the Drua Super Rugby teams will play a massive part in really lifting the level of rugby Fiji will play.
Do you think that, so it offers a different pathway for another tier of players to come through, but do you think there is now an enticement for some of the players overseas to think about coming home or playing closer to home? Because I know that family is very big draw for a lot of players.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, actually. I mean, that was initially I would have thought that the answer would have been yes to that. The likes of Nemani and Ndolo and people like that who are getting towards the end of their careers in their mid-30s may see the Drua as a way to come home. But given the success of the team and the emergence of all the new talent, I'm not sure that that's actually the case.
Right.
I think it generally is a development pathway, and the boys coming through will play for the Drua, then maybe go and get larger contracts overseas. Because I mean, at the end of the day, remittance and money back to the country through professional sport and rugby is still a massive earner for the country. And the boys who are truly talented will get the biggest dollar, and I don't think they can turn that down. So I think the pipeline, the one thing that Fiji has is Fijian, and they will keep coming. The boys talent will keep emerging because genetically that's the way they're set up. So I think there'll be a pathway that will take the boys to the larger money in Europe, perhaps.
My brother messaged me and he said one of the guys he worked with, he must have been at training, and this Fijian boy turned up, and he was 6'5", he was back row, stacked as, I don't think he'd been to the gym yet, and he said, "Oh, can I play?" He goes, "Where do you play?" He goes, "Oh, I play lock or flanker." Yeah, you can play. He goes, "I've got a few friends." He goes, "Oh, okay, they can come and play as well. How many have you got?" He said, "I've got 50." And it's like, all right. It's like, wow, it's like winning the lotto. All keen. But Yeah, that's really exciting. I've been really impressed by the way that they've, both Moana Pacifica and the Drua have just really, re-energized the whole Super Rugby format. And I think that for their first season, and you look at the Jaguares and the other, Sunwolves, who worked hard, obviously, but didn't have the same impact within their first season that both teams have had. And that's really exciting for the islands, for all the islands and all the different cultures that are involved, and rugby itself, because for me, it's very much been an unsung. The Polynesian Pacifica people have always been a very much a sit in the back seat in terms of being showcased. But I think now they deserve every plaudit that they've got, because they've been feeding the world stage for so long, without recognition to the people. That's as obvious as it should be. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. Like, there's a term here in New Zealand, mana motahaki, which is a Māori term for self-determination. And I think that's the Fiji gets to determine its own self now, and so does the Pacific. With these two teams that you mentioned, the Moana and the Drua, it's really good to see. I guess the Moana is primarily Samoan and Tongan, and it's under the umbrella of New Zealand Rugby, and good on New Zealand Rugby for supporting that. The island nations, those two island nations' economies probably aren't large enough to support those teams by themselves. But it's nice to see that the Fiji government and the commercial backers of the Drua has allowed Fiji to have its own team and determine its own pathway. I think it's about time. You make a good point that the boys, the Fijian boys, have supported a lot of teams throughout the world. It's hard to go anywhere. You mentioned you're 50. There's 50 there, and there's 50 more in Suva, and there's 50 in Lotoka, and there's 50 in Singapore. They're all there. So it's nice to have a team, I think, in the Drua that will become a real identity piece for the island.
Yeah, definitely. And it can only mean, the ladies team, their first season, limited preparation, and they made a massive statement. It's pretty cool. Pretty bloody cool to hear that. You were saying just before. Oh, sorry, you go.
No, you go.
You were just saying that you're going to be involved in coaching.
Yeah, well, so there's so the Women's World Cup is on in October in New Zealand, and so I'm one of the coaches for the Fijiana team. So on Wednesday, 2 days time, the Fijiana team they're coming to New Zealand for the first part of that. They play PNG, Samoa, and Tonga in Auckland. Is their bit of a leading tournament. So they've been up there training already, but so this is my first time to be able to sort of connect with them as here in New Zealand, and then I'll go back with them to the islands and help them prepare through August, September, and into October. So really looking forward to that. It's I'm really excited about being part of Fiji Rugby again, and I've coached women here in New Zealand, so I'm really looking forward to being part of that Fijian women's team.
Well, congratulations! That's awesome.
Thank you.
You can. It's again, it's great to be able to represent again and to go back and sort of help support rugby in the country. Talk us through your involvement. So club rugby at home, Super Rugby, played for your country, played for Fiji, the honour of captaining, World Cup. Talk us through how that all came about.
That's a long journey. You look like my dad. My dad came to New Zealand in 1957. He was a migrant when New Zealand opened its borders to the Pacific Islands. He came. He was a boilermaker, welder, by trade. His brother had come before him, and as happens, I guess he set up home in Tokoroa actually,
Oh, really?
and called, yeah, and all the family came down, and so my dad came in 1957 when the borders were open, and down they came in the early 20s.
Wow.
So my dad came there. He subsequently met my mum, and she's a New Zealander, and we had 3 children. So that was the start of it for me. But when I was 11 years old, my dad passed away, and I guess I was young, and that was hard by itself. But the connection to Fiji, I guess, kind of built from that point, and not having my dad, I don't know. But I sense now as I get older and I'm aware of who I am and what's in me. I really sense that my father's inside me, and from about 12, 13, 14, I really started to identify with who I am as a Fijian, and wanting to be part of that. And you reflect on little things along your life, like how decisions were made. But even when I was, I think, in 1987, the Rugby World Cup was in New Zealand, and Fiji was playing Argentina on Rugby Park, Hamilton. Hugo Porter was a star of the Argentina team, but I went down every day and watched the Fijians play, train, sorry. And I remember being on the radio. We had no money, so I was on the radio trying to win tickets to get to the game. My mum bought us a couple of tickets, and we got along to the game. And my grandmother said to me at the time, because it was around my birthday, "What jersey would you like me to buy you for your birthday?" At the time, the Canterbury shop had all the jerseys of the world. You could go and you could choose whatever jersey you wanted. So I ended up choosing Fiji. So my first jersey as a 12 or 13-year-old was a white one. And so I wore that, and off to the game we went. And then later on, as I started to develop as a rugby player, I had some cousins like myself who New Zealand born and part Fijian, play for Fiji, and they said to me when I was about 20, "Do you realise you can actually play for Fiji?" And I had a couple of cousins ahead of me, older than me, that were playing. And I said, "Well, not really, but if that's an eventuality, that's cool, So the coach, I was playing for Waikato at the time. It was my first year is in the Waikato senior team. I was 20, and then came along, and his name was Brad Johnson. He was a famous All Black prop, and he'd just become the coach of Fiji. And so he came and saw me. My coach at the time, John Bowe, was an All Black at the same time as Brad, and they were mates, I guess. And they talked about who, anyway, got talking, and he said, "Would you like to come on tour?" That same year, I'd play for New Zealand 21s. So I was in the New Zealand 21s team, and then I'd play for Fiji, played a test match on Carter Farms Park when I was 21. And then had to, eligibility rules around playing international rugby was changing at the time, and there was a point in time where I could have stopped and tried to pursue being an All Black, or decided to carry on for Fiji. But my connection with my dad and how I felt when I was in Fiji, and then I became the captain in my second year within the team. Kind of was all heading in one direction for me. So my decision, I guess, as a 21-year-old, was to stay where I was with Fiji and pursue, representing my dad's country, and become my country, and be part of Fiji. So that's what kind of led me along that international path. I was lucky enough to play 9 years for Fiji and a couple of World Cups, and got to experience some pretty amazing times with that team.
What gives a couple of special moments, during your rugby career, which sort of, if you think about them, it just feels like yesterday. You can smell the atmosphere. You can just slip straight back into that moment.
Definitely that's my first test match. So we played on the old Carter Farms Park before they took it down, and before they made the park that's there now. So we got to play. I was just a kid, and there was famous players like you and Yane Evans out there running around. Or I'd watched on TV as a small boy, and I was like, wow, I was like,
Yeah.
vividly remember running down the field thinking, that's that guy, like, and then I'm running
I
after
know
him.
you.
I can't catch him, but I'm running after him. So I'm like, oh, I'm on TV with it. So it was an amazing feeling, and the Welsh were singing, and it was a drizzly afternoon. It was cold, and we were going pretty good, and we were right in the game, and it was just surreal. It was absolutely a surreal moment in my rugby career. So I remember that very vividly. And ironically, I mean, there's lots of moments, but for Fiji, I guess I remember the last one too, where we played Scotland at Sydney Football Stadium, and we were that close to. We'd be at Tom Smith scored a try for Scotland in the last moment. I'd come off just after half time. I'd busted my neck, so I was sort of, but I sort of remember sitting in the end of in the shed after that game thinking, man, that's probably it, and so the starts and the ends were very important moments, and I can remember both very vividly, and where I was and how it smelt and what I felt and all those things. But in between, I was lucky enough to play rugby for Waikato, which was in my province, and the Chiefs and Fiji, so that was kind of my lot over 10 years I spent playing footy.
I've still got the photo of your Chiefs jersey after Kieran was born. When we went down to Christchurch, I've got a photo of him on my chest, and Kieran's lying on. He was bloody small, and
yeah.
It's funny the things that you remember, and I remember. I think it summed up. I think you guys were playing the All Blacks, and I think it was the national anthems were going, and it panned in on you, and the emotion that welled up, when the national anthems, and I thought it sums up a hell of a lot, actually. It sums up two journeys that have been going, through life, and you're at the pinnacle of your career, you're representing your country against your country, and it spoke volumes as an awesome moment.
Well, I think the anthems were pretty special times, I think, for me. Standing out there, lots of, I've just written about this recently. One of my daughters had to write a piece for school, so I wrote a piece for her. I hope she told her teacher that it wasn't. Well, I hope she's claimed it. I wasn't supposed to write it, but once I started writing it, I got on with it.
Yeah.
And but I wrote about standing. The anthem was important because you'd stand there and you'd look into the crowd, and it was a moment that it was kind of I don't know, it was also surreal. You'd stand there, you'd listen to the music, you'd sing along, you'd look into the crowd, and it would be 1,000 memories the thoughts would come through your mind, and it was just getting ready to do what you had to do next. But when I was in Fiji, a number of times I would see my dad in the crowd, and he was with his people, and that for me was why the anthem was so special. Was that moment in time where I really did connect with my dad, and my dad never knew that I played for Fiji. He died when I was 11, but I sensed he was there watching me, which is kind of why I keep wanting to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's that's what it's about. That's what drives passion, and they're all looking down on us, sort of just wishing us to be the best that we can, and that's
I'm sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, injury-wise, you mentioned, when you're playing Scotland, you come off in professional sport. It's part of work life, really, that you're in a high collision arena. It's your day-to-day job. How did you cope with the injuries that you received, during your career? And yeah, I'll start with that question first. I won't make it 4 parts.
Well, look, you learn very quickly as a pro that it's part of the job. That and you learn very quickly that you're never going to function as 100% again. Learning to operate at 90 or 95 or 80 or whatever you can operate at. That's actually your job, to get out there and operate at that.
Yeah.
The quest to to be 100% there is always what you're chasing, but the reality is that you're never going to be it again, and or you try to get as close as you can. That's the first thing to really understand, is that your body's going to get damaged, and that's just the way life is.
Yep.
The process of rehabilitating yourself to play again, I guess that was a test of professionalism. So if you were serious about longevity, then you really had to just do the work and just commit yourself to working through the process of getting back on the field. So it's certainly taught discipline. Like, you sustain a lot of injuries. It's a contact sport, and you're in the line of fire. Some positions more than others. You're going to get hurt more than others. So it was, I guess, a mix of that realization that that's your job, because that is your job, and the discipline to maintain your space, because the reality of professional sport is there's always someone behind you that wants your job. There's no lack of players. You mentioned Fiji. There's no lack of players coming. They just keep getting born. So if you're going to be out there for a while, you just got to learn, accept it, and get on with it, and just go through the process.
So did you go through any concussion episodes during your playing career?
Yes, I did. Ultimately that's why I finished.
Yeah.
So I was concussed, but like I can't tell you how many times. It started when I was a small boy, and it carried on right through my career until I finished.
Are we in a better place now with dealing with concussions than we were back then? And
I think so.
Let's go back to club rugby first, as opposed to higher up the food chain.
Look, I'm still actively involved in club, so I think as a whole, rugby as a sport is accepting of the fact that concussion is an injury.
Yep.
First of all, and so concussion is acknowledged as being legitimate where previously it wasn't. So, and I think it's well documented, but you couldn't see it, so it wasn't real. So get on with it. But now I think there's more protocols that sit around it. I don't know if they're as tight as they need to be at club rugby. Still relies on the player to be as honest as they should be.
Yeah.
But there's certainly so that's a club rugby space from what I can observe, and I'm still involved in that. So, but players are happy now to put their hand up and say, like, I'm not okay, which is important, because previously, in the generation that I came into, it certainly wasn't okay to say you had a headache.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you just had to handle and get on with.
Yeah, suck it up, bro. Carry on.
Yeah. Yeah. It certainly was it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what's the next step, do you think, for I was going to say, I haven't seen the game, but the result against for the Fijian boys on the weekend was really, really good. Because
36-0.
That's great, and I think there was a lot of press with the likes of Charles Piatot, and the other boys, Malachi and Israel, stepping up to play for the Tongans. But I think one observation I've had is that, and I know the resource has always gone out of the islands and either move into New Zealand, Australia, or into the Northern Hemisphere. Do you think that playing overseas has, for a lot of the players, has given them the wherewithal and the knowledge to add to the flair, which now they're starting to play, especially the forwards. Some of the set pieces, some of the lineouts are really, really, really strong. And I did watch one game with the Drua, and there were 2 or 3 of the lads were pushing the whole pack back and from a defensive line out, and I thought, man, they're onto a winner there, and I hope that they just carry on and be more successful, because I think they deserve it.
Yeah, probably a couple of things in that. I think that pro rugby has given the boys an opportunity to train properly. First of all, back when I was playing for Fiji, I guess there was there was very few gyms in Fiji for a start, so and there was even less expertise to teach the boys what to do. So there was a few of us, there's a very small number of us that played professional rugby or super rugby. I think more than 2 or 3 or 4 of us only, and then some others played in sort of professional clubs around the world. Especially early days between 95 and sort of 2000. But I think professionalism has given the boys an ability to train. You can just see the size of them now; they're enormous. Like, the size of a Fijian is just unbelievable. Like they are massive humans. So that's done one thing, but also the disciplines of pro rugby. But I think I was talking to a guy that works with me, Helu. He played for Tonga after me. He's a bit younger than me. But we were talking at work today, and he made a good point that the Tongans have come from different teams around the world to prepare with 10 days to go in a tournament, and that's typical. If it's not 10, it's 7 days. It's 7 days, and so all the talent in the world is still going to be hard to get a team to work. I think what Fiji has the benefit of is a number of those combinations have played in the draw together. And those forward combinations and those midfield backs and the combinations that matter, the 9-10s, those combinations that really matter. They actually have played a season of rugby, so I think Fiji's had the advantage of that. But very, very pleasing to see the likes of Fikatoa and Piatau and Palau play for Tonga. It's a really good message to a young island boy that you can go home. You can represent your country. In your family, and it's possible to aspire to be the best in the world, I guess, which is an All Black or Australian or whatever that might be. But you can also connect with your roots, so it's good to see. I think it's a really positive thing for all the island nations.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of the boys that come into the Northern Hemisphere, can you speak to sort of the kind of support that they receive when they get overseas contracts? Because for some of them, they may be leaving home quite early, and it may be the first time they've been overseas.
Yeah. I coached Manu Samoa, and I'm trying to think of the years, 2012 to 14. So we had a lot to do. We went on trips to see where the boys were at and try to get a gauge on them pre-tour. And so I understood the sort of conditions they were in. I hear about stories of boys from parts of Fiji going to France at 14 or 15. There's French clubs that have direct links, and boys disappear from provinces in Fiji at a very young age. There's a range of stories that are successful, and then there's a range of stories that are not successful. And boys arriving in countries only speaking one language, which is their native language, a little bit of English, and then expected to survive in French or something like that. There's some stories that aren't so good as well. And stories of guys getting to a land, getting injured, and then not having enough money to get home or no insurances. And there's still, we hear about the success stories, but there's also a number of stories that aren't so successful. And I believe, the organisations like World Rugby are making efforts. Dan Leal, who runs the Pacific Rugby Players Welfare Network over there, are doing some good work just to connect the boys up, just so that they actually are aware of support mechanisms and just so they feel like they've got a connection to something that can help them. So the question is, can I speak to it? I can speak a little bit to it, but I'm a little out of touch exactly what's going on. But I'm hoping the things that I've heard, there aren't too many horror stories, but I believe they still go on.
Everything seems to be moving in the right direction slowly.
Yes, I think so. I think it is. I'd certainly hope so. Firsthand, when I was playing, I would see boys deposited in somewhere in a valley in Wales with the talk of pounds, and when they really got there, what it actually meant, they struggled to put the heater on and live, because you convert pounds to Fijian dollar, it sounds fantastic, but when you convert it back to pounds and pay the bills, there's no money left. So
Yeah.
you know, well, I hope that's better. I really hope it is, but I don't know for sure.
In terms of sort of managing people's well-being, I've asked a few people this question. The boys go to the gym to strengthen the body, you know, to put muscle on. Where do they go to strengthen their mind from a playing point of view? What kind of things would they do?
Yeah, I guess that's. I mean, it's depending, I guess, what the parts of the mind you're strengthening. You know, that's. I'm aware of. I used to be a professional development manager for the Chiefs. So what that meant was I dealt with the players' lives as people and their transition out of rugby. So I did a similar job, with Olympic sports in New Zealand as well. So kind of familiar with that space here in New Zealand, and aware of the mechanism that sit around the guys. They've also been part of the Chiefs under 18s, or the franchise under 18s, and their under 20 competitions over the last 3-4 years. I can say that there is a lot more effort in New Zealand around the off-field part of the game, far more than I was ever exposed to. The importance of that, I think, has grown enormously. And I was struck when I was first back in the 18s environment for the Chiefs, that half of the camp was based on them as a person and them developing as professionals. The other half was the rugby, so that's been a remarkable difference. When I was younger, and I think it's everyone's understanding just how important that part of the game is. And I also think that New Zealand Rugby has also identified the social responsibility they have to try and make these men that play rugby good men, because they're in the spotlight, and you certainly know when someone makes a mistake, So they're trying to mitigate that by putting the resources around them to make sure they actually have a better set of skills than I guess we were guilty of not having when we were playing, So yeah, I think they're part of the game, the mental side of the game, and there's also, I guess, a greater presence of sports psychs in these environments. So not only the life component, but the performance component that sits around a psych is far more present. I think every team has one. For a long time, Chiefs down here, David Galbraith. David's done a number of things with a number of teams, a number of sports, but he's been, really important to them when they were winning. I think there was a close, correlation between Wayne Smith and Dave Rennie having David Galbraith sit on their hip when they won 2 Super Rugby titles. So yeah, there's certainly growth in that area of the game. In the last, or what I could say, the last 5-10 years, there's been an enormous amount of importance put on that.
Excellent. That's great. At least the guys understand that. Well, they may not understand at the start, but if it's coming in at 18s and then filtering through to seniors, then I think they'd understand the responsibility they've got as players and how they can contribute, just before and even after post-career in rugby.
Yeah.
Our time is. Sorry, you were going to say something else.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the piece that's missing a little bit is the transition after rugby. I think people are still not quite got that piece right. Maybe the dollar doesn't stretch that far, because it's all about when you're performing, but when you don't perform and you're lost and you're finished, that's still a hard transition. I believe it's not quite been sorted out.
Yeah, I think it's trying to help people understand what after looks like while they're on that journey. When times are good, but I think sometimes we can live in the moment and just worry about tomorrow.
Oh, look, mate, I did a presentation to St. Paul's Collegiate this other day, and it was a careers day, and they were talking about professional sports, so a range of sports people, but most of the first 15 came, and the reality to them was 156,000 people that play rugby in New Zealand, there's 190 contracts, right? 0.1% of players in New Zealand get a pro contract, and then when they get it, it lasts for 3 years. You know, and that was a bit of a revelation for them, but definitely plan B.
Well, I know that you know, the numbers even worse in the UK. You know, you got
really wow.
There are over 2 million people playing here, and the number of contracts is maybe similar numbers, but on a bigger scale. You know,
man, that's amazing. Eh?
It's and I think and then you think about America coming online, you know, properly to play rugby properly, and it just opens another world of possibilities.
Yeah, it does. It's positive, and then there's a whole lot of, you know, off the back of the bright side, there's the dark side, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. Look, I know that our time is up, and you're busy, so I won't hold you much longer. In terms of, we love the Chiefs. It's been a tough couple of seasons, and I've had banter back and forward with the guys on the course I did through the Crusaders, and they're all, well, the majority. I'm the only non-Crusaders supporter, so I've been given through and through. I think we're in a decent place. Good to have Damien back. But what are your thoughts on when we may be able to clinch another title?
Well, look, I think they're getting closer. You know, it's a pretty strong culture being built there the last couple of years. You know, it's I think we had a bit of connection with the senior team and the environment by coaching them in the 20s for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And so we've sort of allowed inside their environment to look at how they operate, which is a nice privilege to have. And I think, you know, they're not far off. They're the third New Zealand side this year. They got close. They got in the top 4 of the whole competition. The Crusaders are always good. The Blues were good this year. You know, if we were with a third team, we're not far away. The margins are thin, and I think the game that they lost against the Crusaders to make the final was just based on maybe the naivety of being in the moment. Where the Crusaders were the pros and the Chiefs just froze in the moment. And so not far, but that's, I guess, what a truly professional team does, is understand the moments, and they'll get better because they failed in that moment, but perhaps they'll learn, and perhaps next year, and you know, the roster still looks strong, and you know, there's certainly heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I thought, I don't think they, from what I could see, they didn't click all season, and they still came third, and they're probably about 5 or 7 passes away from winning the title quite easily. But again, you know, that's that hard-edged, you know, in the moment, being present, executing your skill. Yeah,
agree. I mean, if they could have taken 2 or 3 moments back in that Crusaders game and did it again, they probably won that game and be in the final with the Blues.
Yeah, exactly.
Not this year. Not this year.
No, not this year. It bodes well.
Yeah,
a bit like being a Warriors fan.
Oh, look, they won, mate. They won. They got home and they won.
Hey, I'll finish the recording now, and we'll just have a quick catch up afterwards. So look, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate it. What I may do is drop you. I'll have a chat with you in a minute. But yeah, I appreciate your time, and it's lovely to understand that even though years have gone by where you stood on the podium and represented, and you're back in the mold again and helping to sort of build for the next generation of Fijian rugby. It's really, really good.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to talk to you. And yeah, I'm privileged to be in the position I am to go and help my country again. So yeah, really looking forward to it. It's gave me a whole lot, so I'm looking forward to giving some back.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, that's awesome. That is awesome.